Good. So real quick, right before I get started, I just want to acknowledge my two advisors on this project, Professor Olson from Computer Science and Professor Freund from Mechanical/Aerospace. So what was the original motivation behind this project? As you may have guessed from my title, it had to do with blood flow. So Professor Freund and several previous and current members of our research group have done numerous studies about aspects of the mechanics and dynamics of blood flow, red blood cells, transport of white blood cells. Here's an example of when I was trying to look at what are the conditions that determine whether cells end up looking like this or like this, the same size tube with the same flow rate. But the problem was we were coming up against some limitations in terms of the scalability and feasibility of certain types of simulations with our current code. So trying to come up with new ideas, and this was the motivation behind it originally. But there's other potential applications of this. Electrostatics I bolded because I'm going to talk more about it, quite a bit more about it actually. But also these other types of plasma dynamics, gravitational dynamics. Really the common thread is just applications where you have dynamics that can be described by Green's function solutions to the Poisson equation. So that means combinations of the solutions to the singular Poisson equation, where the right-hand side here is the delta function that's only non-zero at one point, so the singular force on the right-hand side. So more about what I'm talking about with the singular Poisson problems here. The model problem we've been using is from electrostatics, and so we just have a collection of n point charges with certain strengths, and the potential due to all these charges at a location is a discrete sum of these singular Poisson problems associated with the location and the strength of the different charges in the collection. And then over here with the blood flow, we have Stokes flow, so where the Reynolds number goes to 0, and we're satisfying these two equations here. And here the delta functions, the singular forces, are on the surfaces of the cells, so the effects of the cell surface on the fluids. So the Green's function solutions for these look like this. Again, for electrostatic, we have just a discrete sum of the strengths and the Green's function. And this Green's function here is the 1 over r decay, the familiar electrostatic potential from physics class. For the cells, of course, looks more complicated with this boundary integral formulation, but it's still just a combination of these Green's functions, except now we have an integral over the cell surfaces instead of a discrete sum. And it does get more complicated. I see, oh, this is not the updated version of my slide, but this is the same as electrostatics plus an extra 1 over r cubed term, and then this other Green's function is formed from taking derivatives of this g, I, j, and it has also r to the 5th in it. So basically just a more complicated version of this, but the two problems are definitely related, and that's why we're using the electrostatic problem as our model problem for this. Maybe on the surface they may not seem like they're related, but that's why I'm going to be talking more about electrostatics. Green's functions have global support, so the solution at one point in your domain, you need information from all the other points in the domain because of this very slow decay of the 1 over r type potential. So a lot of the current codes in these areas fall into two major groups to avoid the n squared cost of a direct evaluation of the Scalable methods. And if you were here this morning for Professor Bios's talk, you heard a lot about fast multiple methods. Great talk. But the idea behind that is that you can, for groups of points that are further away from the point you're looking at, you can use this multipole expansion instead of having to do every point individually. Or another major category of these methods is the so-called P3M methods, where what the idea behind these is it takes that Green's function that has slow decay and splits it into two parts. One part is short range, so it does have quick decay. So when you're evaluating it, you can just keep a certain small subset of points instead of the entire collection of points, which cuts down on the cost. And then the leftover, the smooth part here, is solved for everything on a mesh. And the proposed method I'm talking about falls into this P3M framework, though I do have a few things related to multipole in there. So more about P3M then, since this is the framework I'm talking about. The most popular variant is the PME, the Ewald sum version of it. And the way that it accomplishes this splitting of the Green's functions is by introducing Gaussian screens. So here we have a singular force, a delta function. And if we add in this screen and also subtract it back out there, we still have our original force we started with. But if you take the potential of these two things together, that's how you get this. It's a short range thing that decays much more quickly than the original 1/r potential. And because we form these screens out of Gaussians, then you can solve this mesh problem really well with the fast Fourier transform, or the FFT. And this is great in a lot of ways. FFT has a lot of really great properties, but unfortunately, scalable parallel implementation is not really one of them. Due to the communication requirements of the FFT, it becomes a real bottleneck in the code. And this is the code I mentioned earlier that I had the pictures from the simulations on the second slide. This was a PME code. This is the main problem for scalability of that code. So the idea here is, can we make a new method, a new version of P3M, which has the same idea, but we're creating it in such a way that all the components are going to be more local in nature so that we can have better parallel scaling. So the idea that Professor Freund came up with was, what if instead of using Gaussian screens, we build our screens out of piecewise polynomials of order p, and then for this mesh solve, the smooth part, we can solve it with finite elements of p plus 2 order. We add the 2 because we need 2 integrations for the solution. And the neat thing about that is because we're using this specific space with the p plus 2, we're formulating it so this is a finite element solution is exact. So the potential we're looking for, which is 2 orders higher than our screens, it is in this finite element space that we're looking for solutions in. And then we can replace that FFT with a multigrid solver, which has a lot better parallel scaling. And it's really well suited to the Poisson problem. Just a little bit more about these screens. So how do we actually choose screens that'll work? You set the coefficients of the piecewise polynomials such that the integral of the screen is equal to the strength associated with that point. And then you cancel as you set to 0 as many orders as you can, as many moments as you can about the screen around the point charge. And what this does is, if you look at terms from the multipole expansion, it removes leading terms from the multipole expansion for all the moments you can cancel. And so then that increases the decay rate of your short range potential that's left over. And the correlation here is, if your screen is order p, you get short range, it's going to decay like 1/r to the minus p plus 2. So a linear screen would be like 1/r cubed instead of 1/r, etc. And here are just some examples of slices from increasing order of screens, and you can see as you increase the order of p, you can kind of hone in on the location of the charge there that you're wanting to screen. So that's why you can get better and better decay, more moments canceled. So that's great, but does it actually work? This is a really simple test case just to show the ideas here about this trade-off between order and the two different parts of the potential. So we have 1,000 randomly distributed point charges in a triply periodic box, and I'm looking at the potential along the diagonal here at 100 different points just sampled along this diagonal through the cube. And here's what the potential looks like along that diagonal. It's got order of magnitude around 10 to the 2. And then for my initial calculation, I used this method to calculate the potential, and I used linear screen, so p equals 1, and a relatively short cutoff distance, so that's how many of the points do I need to keep in that smaller subset of the short range potential part. And here the magnitude of the error is 10 to the minus 2 for this case here. And if we want to decrease the error, what can we do? We can either increase that cutoff distance, so we can keep more charges in the short range part before we say, okay, I'm going to cut it off here and only use this part. Or, to get a more drastic improvement in error, we can increase the order of the screens to quadratic screens. And of course, as you increase the order of the screens, you also are incurring more work in the other things you do in the solve. So there's always this trade-off between what's the optimum value of p for what you want for the problem. So big picture, big things I was talking about. You have fast multipole methods for these problems. You also have P3M methods, which includes the Ewald sum, which is very popular now, and also what we are proposing, a new version of P3M designed to be parallel. And takeaway points, so we're going to replace the screens that are designed for an FFT solve with screens that are designed for a finite element solve, an exact finite element solve. And the nice thing about this property of the finite element solve is that you can choose the mesh size based on computer architecture or maybe physical aspects of the problem, something you want to model. You don't have to worry as much about accuracy demands for your mesh. So that gives you a lot of flexibility in tuning the method to what you're running on. And finally, it's compatible with general boundary conditions. So basically, if you can impose the boundary conditions on your finite element solve, then you can put them in this method without too much changing of the other parts of what's going on. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I will take them.
Questions? Have you done any experiments to check if your bounds are, you cannot really achieve those bounds in terms of scalability and complexity in terms of problem size?
I haven't actually been scaled it up into a lot yet. That's what I'm working on right now. So this is still just running on very simple problems.
Questions? So if not, let's thank Natalie once again.